evening, everyone. If it's the first time watching, my name is Ruby Suze. On here I show my journey through fertility, how I went through the fertility journey. I talk about my motherhood and every other crazy thing that I get up to. I hope you've had a great week. I'm coming to you to talk to you about my fertility journey, and I share these stories not because I want to necessarily put my name out there, but simply because I don't want anyone to feel alone, and I want to break this silence that there seems to be around fertility and infertility and IVF and all these things that we go through. So I just wanted to come to you today because I got an email from someone who asked me, how do I feel about frozen embryos? How do I feel about freezing my eggs? And I sat back and I just, like, it's taken me this long to respond because that in itself is such a deep question to me. There is a time of year that I absolutely dread, and I mean that I dread it every single time. It's so much so that I don't actually know what month it comes. I think it's October, but I'm not sure. But it's a time of the month, and I can tell always because the time of the year, because I get you get one of those envelopes and it's got the hospital's name on it, and I know exactly what's inside that envelope. And inside that envelope is my renewal for my embryo storage. And for those of you who don't know, I have no tubes. My tubes had to be removed because they were both blocked, so I could only get pregnant through IVF. And through the process of IVF, I had a lot of eggs produced and then had a lot of embryos that were fertilized. So I now have, I had 11 embryos fertilized and that were then put into storage. And then I had one taken out, which I'm re-implanted for my daughter. So I've got 2 children now. But long story short is that I have 10 embryos in storage, and every year that I get this letter, it feels like I'm catapulted back to when I was told that I would never be able to get pregnant naturally. And I just can't stand that time. I can't stand that letter. And every time I open up this letter, it feels like people are asking me, do you want to keep your babies? And scientifically, these embryos are just a collection of cells. Scientifically, I know that. Scientifically, on paper, that makes complete sense. However, in my heart, in my mind, it doesn't. They're not just cells. They're my babies. They're children. They're just not breathing, living yet. And it doesn't make logical sense to anybody, but it does to me. And also because I don't want my childbearing. I'm not ready to say no more children yet, to be honest. And because of that, every time I get that letter, it just feels like this massive dilemma in my head. I go through all sorts of emotions, and it really takes a lot for me to process it. And also it's financially, it's expensive because you have to pay each year that you want to keep your embryos in storage. This is an expensive medical situation that you need to keep up, you need to keep going. It's like paying, for your monthly insurance. It's a cost that you are bearing on your family that you have to consider. And the answer to that question, to that email that I was sent, is the honest truth is, for me personally, I'm not ready to let go yet. And I think it's a personal thing. I think it's how you view life and life form and where it begins. It's a deep question. It's almost like it's almost talking like abortion. You know how there's a massive debate about where life begins? To me, it's the same debate. And I'm just not ready to let go yet. I'm just not ready to say, okay, that's it. I don't know how. I don't know whether that's because I'm tying to the idea of the fact that I want to have more children, or whether it's just because in my heart it just feels like that's it. And me saying, letting go of those embryos is like saying that's it. That's the finality of it. The likelihood of me getting pregnant any time soon biologically is impossible because I have no tubes naturally. And yeah, that's quite a big ask, and I think you have to look at your individual circumstance and work out what's right for you, and work out how many children you want to have. And it also depends on how many embryos. To me, 11 is quite a large number for me to let go of. You know, other people might feel like it's, you know, 1 or 2 might be easier. I don't know. But you have to kind of look deep within yourself and figure out what's right for you. And I don't feel pressured to kind of, you know, so long as you're not suffering financially. It is a big, it's a, you know, substantial cost. But if you're not suffering financially, I don't think there's anything wrong with you just, you know, keep paying them. If you're not ready to face it yet, I don't feel like you have to feel forced to doing that. So I have embryos on embryos that are freezing, and I know that there are many other ways that women who get to 30 who then decide that they're going to freeze their eggs, even though they haven't found, they're not married or anything, they make that decision because they are fully aware that the quality of eggs might decline, or they might not have enough, or they've got medical conditions that involve that. So if you want to freeze your eggs or freeze your embryos, I think that's a wise decision to make, because you don't know how many times, especially when you're going through IVF, the success rate might not be so high, or is not very high. It's not everybody who does IVF that gets pregnant the first time, or even at all. So I think freezing embryos has got to be encouraged, only because it prevents you having to go through the whole IVF protocol all over again. You know, I know several people who went through IVF, went through and got the embryos, and for one reason or another couldn't get the implantation done the first time, so they had to abandon the IVF the first time, and then they got pregnant on the second time when they used a frozen embryo transfer. So it's all relative, in the sense that you have to choose what relates to you, what works for you, and you know, that's the only advice I can give. I'm sorry this is not a polished video. I'm sorry that this isn't necessarily a definitive answer, but it's just that I think that everything, it relies on you and your home and how best it relates to you, and how best it's going to work for you. For me personally, I'm just not ready to let go yet, and I don't think that's a problem, because it's not necessarily affecting me and my family, so to our detriment. So take your time to think about it. I don't think there's anything wrong with frozen embryos. Just take your time, pause, think about it, speak to the doctors as well, because as the years go by, I'm fully aware that the longer that the embryos stay in storage, the potential of them actually turning into to live pregnancies or live births possibly declines, I think. So I mean, I think this is the 4th year that we would have had embryos in storage, and I'm not sure now how viable they would be if I was to get frozen embryo transfers. So I don't know. I'd need to research that. So speak to your gynecologist or your IVF specialist, the doctor who's dealing with you, and they'll be able to advise you more. But I definitely highly recommend freezing embryos, just because I think it's easy on the body if you're going to have a second child. My daughter was through a frozen embryo transfer, and I just didn't need to have so many drugs. So I really hope that helps you. If it did, please do give me a thumbs up. I hope if you've got any more questions, please do feel free to send me an email, leave a comment below, and I will get back to you. I might not get back to you straight away, but I will definitely get back to you, and I'll answer your questions as best and as honestly as I can. So this is just a little information to help you about frozen embryos. Make sure you take a moment right now, this minute, as soon as this video ends, to say something kind to yourself today. Be loving towards yourself, because, you know, loving somebody else means that you have to have love inside yourself first anyway. So I hope that helps you, and even if it doesn't, I hope you enjoyed watching. I'll speak to you in my next video. Take care. Bye.